Good morning, everyone. I am Taylor Berger, the content manager here at Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar all about mastering the use of robotic automation in the warehouse presented by Berkshire Grey. Before we get started, I want to remind you that there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of today's presentation. So audience, please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can, time permitting. Now, we're officially past the point where only those ahead of the curve are leveraging robotic automation in their warehouses. In fact, failing to embrace automation might now put you in jeopardy of lagging behind. In today's climate, automation is now a necessity for competitive retailers to maintain a fully staffed warehouse. I want to introduce our speaker, Noah Maynard, who is the Principal Solutions Architect at Berkshire Grey. Noah works closely with customers to assess their operations and identify the best way to implement robotic solutions. Welcome, Noah, and I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. So one framework for thinking about the adoption of advanced technologies is the notion of crossing the chasm. And you'll have to forgive me, there are better explanations of that principle available than what I'm about to offer you. So if you're interested in learning more about that topic, you should go seek those out. But for our purposes of our discussion today, generally speaking, the idea is that when there's an adoption curve of new disruptive technologies when they're introduced. And robotic automation is what we're talking about in this case. So once the new technology becomes available, there are highly innovative companies that are not risk averse, who are willing to place big bets and try new things. Those are the innovators, the techies on the left side of this curve here. After that, there's a larger group that's going to adapt technology before it becomes mainstream. They're willing to take a little more risk than their competitors, but not quite as much as the innovative companies. And after those companies, those early adopters or visionaries adapt the technology, there's this big delta. Here it's referred to as the chasm. That separates those early adopters from the rapid adoption and the technology from becoming mainstream. This is the notion of crossing the chasm. And once the technology adoption does cross the chasm, seeing these disruptive technologies is no longer the exception. The technology becomes more and more commonplace. And I believe that those of you who walk around a large number of warehouses and distribution centers would agree, robotic automation in warehouses and distribution centers, you can find more and more implementations and an ever-increasing presence. We've officially crossed the chasm, and we're in a phase of rapid adoption. So note that the far right side of that graph, those are the folks who we're calling laggards. Those are the folks who are going to be late to the game here. 10 years ago, only the most innovative retailers or companies were implementing advanced technology like robotic automation, and now everyone is looking at it, and folks are getting left behind. Those folks who are getting left behind, they're going to adapt the technology after the majority of their competitors have done so. After they've implemented the technology, they've ramped the technology, in many cases, even after they've expanded the technology, and those laggards are going to be on the back foot in terms of maintaining their operations using this vital technology. So let's talk a little bit about labor. Everyone who's talking in this space is the labor is probably the first thing that comes up. So we're talking about it in the context of this technology adoption. There's no wonder that this technology is getting adopted rapidly, and labor availability has been and it continues to be a key driver in the adoption of this disruptive technology. The challenge, as you all know, of hiring into distribution centers continues to grow. And robotic automation, represents an opportunity to ease this burden. The early adopters and now the early majority, the folks on the left side of that curve, they've recognized this, and they know that they can ease this burden through the implementation of this new disruptive technology. The need to hire less staff into distribution centers, that was a huge driver for the movement along this curve into the adoption. But the way that folks are thinking about value of technology is changing. The traditional way of doing this was to simply justify an investment through labor displacement, meaning companies would look at a headcount number, they would punch in a wage, and the price of the investment, and they would think about the payback periods in a very simple fashion, just simply based on labor displacement. And as everyone knows, labor is very important, but it isn't everything. The innovative companies, companies that are moving along the adoption curve faster, they understand the broader context for value that automation can bring. They understand that labor displacement, but they also understand labor availability. Simply thinking about labor displacement, that kind of implies that there's labor available in the first place. And that's just not the case in many or even most markets. So they're thinking about the labor availability rather than displacement and the value of that. They also think about their total network, not just the cost in the warehouse. Innovative companies are thinking about network-wide impacts. In retail, for example, they think about impacts of operations in the store and the value that automation in a distribution center can bring to that. For e-commerce, they think about the impact of automation on shipping costs, and not just the operations and labor in the warehouse or distribution center. Companies are also considering impacts on receiving, on maintenance, business continuity, and beyond. So the innovative companies, the ones that are further along in that curve of technology adoption, understand that quantifying all of these doesn't make robotic automation attractive. It makes it a necessity for continued growth and health of their business. So the old way of thinking about value was simply measuring relative to an hourly wage that a company doesn't have to pay anymore. But the new way of thinking about value is thinking about the broader impact, about the entire network, upstream of the operation, downstream of the operation, as well as within the four walls of the DC. So now retailers are thinking broader about automation. Let's talk a little bit more about the automation that they're looking for. Retailers firstly want solutions that are integrated into existing buildings and operations. These companies are operating in buildings today, and no one can afford a full-scale replacement. There's not time or money for such an endeavor. And there's rightful hesitance due to cost, among other things, to open new greenfield buildings. When companies think about robotic automation, they want solutions that they can integrate alongside what they do today. Along these lines, they also want thoughtful implementations that don't limit the building or require any downtime. Buildings implementing robotic automation still have a job to do. They don't have the luxury of long time events to implement new improvements. So robotic automation solutions must be implemented while goods flow into and out of the DC. And they also, of course, have to respect peak impacts. That's key. And many times they want project schedules that avoid implementations during peak entirely. So that's important. Another thing that's important, though, too, is they want systems that are easy to maintain and that don't require any specialized skills. The maintenance staff in distribution centers are critical stakeholders in maintaining business continuity. And robotic automation must inherently be designed to leverage the skill sets of those key stakeholders. They can't be disenfranchised by the implementation of this new technology. The technology itself must be embraceable by the folks that are already working in the building. Another thing that retailers want in kind of a similar vein, customers want robotic automation that is easy to learn and to use. They want systems that can lead to lower employee turnover and happier customers. And so really customers for robotic automation, they want the best of both worlds. They want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to retain their best and brightest workers, and they also want to enable them to be more productive, safe, and efficient. So when companies are thinking about solutions, particularly in robotic automation, what makes a good solution? We're going to focus on three characteristics. The first characteristic is that the solution must be flexible. It has to adapt to a variety of use cases. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these as I go on here. Another characteristic is that the solutions must be scalable. They have to have the ability to grow and change over time. And the last is that they must be simple. Simple means easy to operate. It means easy to maintain. And it also means easy to integrate, especially in brownfields. It's very common. Everyone is trying to do more with what they already have. That's their first choice. So talking a little bit more about flexibility of automated solutions. Companies are looking for solutions that are proven, that can adapt to a variety of use cases. They can change over time because nobody can predict the future. Flexibility is a key value. Another one is scalability. They want the ability for the solutions to grow over time. Nobody wants to build take a massive investment on a 10-year forecast if they can avoid it. So solutions that are scalable are safer in this respect. They can have an initial implementation, be proven, adapted, and then expanded at the right time to match the actual growth that's occurring versus kind of designing based on speculative growth. Another tenet, another principle of a good solution is that it must be simple. And when I say simple, I mean it's easy to operate, it's easy to maintain, it can use their existing and proven and trusted staff. It's also easy to integrate. That's true of brownfields, like I said. That's true in terms of fitting into the workflows that already exist that we're working alongside. So simplicity is another key principle here. So again, key values here: flexible, scalable, and simple. And Berkshire Grey solutions happen to be designed to achieve all of these principles. Let's talk a little bit more about this in the context of the robotic product sortation as a use case for describing these principles and how they might be embodied in a robotic automation solution. And firstly, let's talk about the value, right? There's a holistic view of value that's important, and then those principles that we talked about. So firstly, on value, the robotic product sortation system from Berkshire Grey, it does offer that key value here, which is a reduction in labor, typically around 4x on a given implementation. So really providing that key relief valve for the hiring needs that are problematic throughout the industry. Additionally, we're talking about upstream and downstream impacts. The robotic product sortation system offers lower shipping costs, for example. And the way that it does that is it actually gets more units into boxes, which leads to retailers, for example, handling less boxes, both on trucks, in the warehouse, at the store. So there's a network-wide benefit that is present here for the solution because of that value. And it also does all this within a small footprint. Typically, the Berkshire Grey solutions, when you compare them to competitive systems, they're doing the same throughput in about 50% of the throughput. So it's doing more with less. So there's value there. It's improved shipping costs, and again, a very large reduction in labor. So a very holistic view of what the system can bring to bear on an operation from a value perspective. I'll talk a little bit now about the solution relative to flexibility. And one very obvious way that the system is flexible is that it offers two modes of induction. There are systems that we offer that have manual induction, where an operator can place multiple units into the system at one time. It's really designed around a retail use case where, for example, if I'm shipping 2 or 3 units to a store of a given item, this operator can be highly effective. Other opportunities, though, where lights out automation is more valuable, offer fully roboticized induction into the system. So there's a lot of optionality there that speaks to the flexibility of the platform. So fully robotic option is one element of the Berkshire Grey product sortation flexibility. Another is that can adapt to customers' requirements. We can adapt different shipping container sizes based on customer need. It can be scaled on throughput. It can be scaled on location counts. Very adaptable to given customers' needs. And it also has the opportunity to, for example, fulfill both e-commerce and retail through the same solution. So a truly omni-channel offering, flexibility in that. And so if there's changing times over the course of the year, or even over the course of a shift, the system is robust to those changes and it's flexible under different use cases. It also does a lot of e-commerce and store replenishment through the same system. It also deploys into buildings where other technologies can't, very brownfield ready, very mezzanine ready. And it also can sort items that other technologies simply can't. Things that roll, things that are very large, things that are very small. So a ton of flexibility in the platform in terms of what it offers. Another tenet of a good solution, right, is scalability. And the Berkshire Grey robotic product sortation offers that as well. It is a highly modular platform. The systems are deployed in groups, and so they all work together, and those can be expanded and scaled over time as needs change. So it accommodates growth, And it also is easy to adapt to needs. It's easy to we regularly do an initial install of these systems, and then we add more as store and volume growth changes over time. And it's done in real time. It's not done, again, based on those 10-year projections, which are difficult and spurious. They're done based on actual. So it's much more scalable in terms of actual experience of our customers than potentially competitive solutions. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about how the Berkshire Grey product sortation system is simple. There's minimal training required. You're basically at full productivity, at full accuracy within one shift when you're doing the human induction into the system. It's highly reliable. The maintenance staff likes it. There's no new skills, and it becomes kind of the pride of the operation. So it's very simple and easy to maintain with the existing staff, and it is a way to keep them embraced in terms of the automation journey. So the workers like automation. And then also in terms of simplicity, it's easy to integrate into the workforce. It's also easy to integrate into existing software, into existing hardware, into existing DC material flows. Again, this platform, for example, is very brownfield ready. Many of the deployments that we do are brownfield. That kind of speaks to how simple it is to integrate into existing flows. So this is enabling, as a summary, the solution is enabling businesses to increase their order pick fulfillment by up to 4x without adding additional labor. We're improving shipping capacity for our customers and container queue by up to 10%. We're handling a huge range of SKUs, 100% of typical break pack SKU assortments. And this is operating either standalone or integrated with other technologies in the building. It can be fed by traditional material handling systems that exist in the building, for example, like ASRS. It can be fed by processing areas. It can be fed by manual picking. Very, again, flexible and simple in that respect. It installs a minimal footprint, again, either greenfield or brownfield, with high throughput per square foot. And it affords basically the configurability of different container sizes, different batches. This is a turnkey solution with enterprise integrations for robust security. So Berkshire Grey Technologies, we take a holistic view. We consider how companies do their business today, how they'll do their business in the future. And really, this is kind of designed around those principles, right? Value, flexible, scalable, simple. So we're going to transition to discussion shortly here, but in closing, relative to the presentation, value for robotic automation and deployments is about more than just labor. Innovative companies are thinking holistically about value throughout the DC. They're also thinking about it upstream and downstream, and they need to be mindful that their technology can affect all of those areas and really take a holistic view of what value it can bring when they think about the right automation for their opportunities. And again, what makes a good solution? Flexible, ready to adapt to our customers' changing environments over time. Scalable, our customers are growing, and we need to grow our systems in time with those customers when they're ready for that growth. And then lastly, simple, easy to maintain, easy to operate, easy to integrate. Plug and play solutions into DCs without disruption. Those are key values of a technology solution. And Berkshire Grey systems embody these principles, and they capture the holistic value in those operations. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Taylor.
Thanks, Noah, for the fascinating presentation. Berkshire Grey has a lot to offer their customers. I want to remind our audience quickly that there will be a question and answer segment. So I want to encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be addressing those live, and we're going to get to as many as we can, time permitting. Now, let's move on to our panel questions. First question, if a company has not yet embraced robotic automation, where should they consider starting? Are there services available to assist companies in evaluating robotic automation for their facilities?
Yeah, there's a lot of answers to that question. And I should highlight too that every customer that's evaluating automation is different. Some customers develop their own internal centers of excellence with folks that they bring in typically from industry that are kind of dedicated within the company to working on automation and thinking about automation and how it can impact their operations. Others rely on site leadership. For example, we work a lot with building general managers, with building engineering managers. And so a lot of companies are leaning on those folks as they think about evaluating robotic automation. And also similarly, facilities departments, engineering departments, the folks that are kind of experts at technology that are already in the business, and that are already trusted, they understand it, but they also have the ability to kind of work with robotic automation suppliers when they're thinking about starting on this journey. There's also a lot of tools available. We do a lot of facility assessments and SKU assessments in partnership with those folks we talked about. We do some simulation where necessary, where valuable, to kind of show how the systems could work together in a living, breathing warehouse, and give a picture for that as folks are starting this journey. And so there's tools that we use that customers should use when they think about opportunities. Another piece of this is consultation. A lot of folks are working with peers from industry at typically non-competitive companies, and seeing what best practices are there. And of course, paid consultation is available. I think the approach that we like typically is that we are trying to be typically a consultative innovator or a consultative seller. I think working directly with customers leads to the most organic fits of technology, the best adoptions in operation. And I think that's important. Everyone wants to get it right when they're starting on an automation journey. And again, consultative relationships with technology providers, working with the people who know the buildings best, we find typically is the most effective way for folks to start on this path.
Fantastic. It sounds like there's a lot of resources available. Always a good thing. So, returning to our discussion on measuring the value of automation, could you provide more insight or offer some examples of how companies have factored in both upstream and downstream impacts when developing their models?
Sure. So one example I could give, maybe let's think about implementing an automation solution, and this automation solution has more orders available to it than the traditional methodology. And so previously, maybe when a system was running or an operation was running, maybe they had 500 orders available to them. Now let's suppose with automation that there's 1,000 or 1,500 orders available to them. It gives a lot of opportunities in areas, elsewhere in the building. For example, in receiving. So if more orders are available at a given time, when I'm receiving goods into the warehouse, those goods, if they're because there's more orders available, basically, those goods could be directed directly to the automation system instead of being put away and then retrieved again. So saving both a put away touch and a retrieval touch. And that's just a function of, again, more orders being available because of the automated solution. That's maybe too specific of an example, but that's a way, for example, in receiving that, automation can bring value without actually even directly affecting that particular task. Another one, though, that's maybe more tangible, is like shipping. If on the shipping side, for example, if automation allows you to fit more goods into a box, you handle less boxes or totes. And that provides savings in the DC. There's less palletizing or stacking or whatever. There's less handling. There's less totes. There's a lot of value to that. But that's also true of operations in the truck, in and off of the truck. It's also true of operations in the store. And so there's a lot of value, again, beyond just labor displacement, by, for example, getting more goods into a box on the retail side. And then on e-commerce, it's even more obvious. On e-commerce, if I can fit more goods into a container, I pay less shipping costs, kind of as a principle. So and that can be a really big value. And I think, customers that we talk to who are farther along in innovation, think about those things more than the folks who are singularly focused on DC labor. Yeah, I don't know. That's hopefully not too meandering answer to that question.
No, it's not meandering. I mean, there's a lot of value there. It's good to touch on all of it. So, okay, given the trend of many companies aiming to reduce their capital expenditures, that's CapEx, could you delve into the specifics of brownfield installations or offer guidance on key considerations when assessing automation solutions in this context?
Yeah, okay. There's a couple points there. One is maybe obvious, is that it's beneficial sometimes to look at solutions that can use or reuse assets that are already in the building when possible. For example, if a customer has 3 miles of conveyor in their building already, and you're bringing a new solution in, if you can leverage that big investment that's kind of proven that the operation's already adapted, if you can leverage a lot of that, there's inherent value, right? It makes it a little easier, makes the investment smaller. That can be a benefit. You also should think about value per square foot. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the customers that we work with, they are automating because they are growing. They're trying to deal with that growth, and they also don't want to buy a new building. They're trying to kind of get everything that they can out of their existing asset. And so customers that we work with a lot, they have a manual process where you've got to have space for people to walk in and out. You've got to have areas for supervisors to hang out. You've got to have exception areas. Like there's just a lot of overhead in terms of space for a lot of manual operations. And so customers who are thinking, trying to avoid big investments like buying a new building, getting more value out of the same square footage is a benefit.
Great.
And I would also say too, like expandable over time. I think if customers are CapEx conscious, buying a $60 million system is a lot harder than buying a $10 million system. And maybe they would buy that $10 million system because they need it for the next 3 years, and then they could expand that over time. And so maybe the total investment's the same long term, but they're doing it piecemeal, and so they're kind of realizing better the value of money if they are CapEx constrained. And then I should also mention the buzzword that's out there everywhere, which is robots as a service. Service models are ever increasing in popularity. They basically trade that upfront CapEx cost for recurring costs. And if people are CapEx constrained, certainly that's attractive. And so I think a lot of that is flexibility. A lot of that is scalability. Those are some of the principles we talked about. And those things can help with folks, again, who are CapEx constrained.
Great. Yeah. So you also briefly touched on the importance of retaining critical labor in warehouses, especially concerning how staff is reacting to that. Do you think you could provide a detailed example of customer implementation and maybe share feedback on how it was received by the workforce?
Sure. As a general and as an obvious statement, forgive me, change management is important in any of these implementations that go into particularly ones that go into existing operations. And customers bear a huge responsibility here. My answer here is not to diminish any of the value of what our customers do, in terms of change management, bringing their workforce along for big transformational change in their building, because change can be difficult for parties and organization, and automation fits well within this category. And we take this really seriously. We're very mindful of this. We have a lot of experience working with customers, and so we know how important this is. And so, for example, maintenance operators, as I said, are really important stakeholders in adapting automation. If maintenance operators don't embrace the technology, they don't maintain the technology doesn't stay up, there's headwinds that are provided if maintenance isn't on board to adoption and to expansion. And so, for example, from a product perspective, we're really mindful of that. We bring value by designing technologies that enable existing staff in the building rather than requiring new skill sets to be introduced. And the similar is true of everyone who touches automation. Supervisors, they need good visibility, they need metrics, they need forecasting, and operators, the folks who are, for example, in the human stations, product sortation systems, the ones who are inducting into the stations, those folks have to be in the boat as well. It's critical. And so to your specific prompts, we had an implementation where we implemented our robotic product sortation systems with a human induction. There was a season selector who was at the site that we were deploying into. This operator had spent a couple decades doing the manual selection process that our system was replacing. And she was actually getting ready to retire or take a job outside of the warehouse when we were implementing. But while she was still at the company in the warehouse, she did the training for our system. And she actually decided that she would delay her retirement and work in the warehouse longer because she didn't have to walk anymore. She didn't have to lift heavy boxes anymore. She could stay in the job that she knew she also got to be around automation, which she and a lot of people, frankly, find exciting. So the warehouse, their benefit is they got to keep a seasoned operator, and the selector got to stay in this job that they knew well and worked with folks that they knew well in a place that they were comfortable, because the job got much more attractive to them. So that's one anecdote of where we found this to be the case.
And that's fascinating. I like the idea of robots working with people rather than replacing them. That's what it sounds like is what you're hitting at. So these days, facilities are increasingly operating 24/7 to meet increasing demands, which ensures system uptime and mitigates the risk of a single point of failure. That's paramount. Do you think you could elaborate on that aspect?
Yeah. I think to me, it's questions about continuity, and it's subsequently it's about adoption. So continuity is keeping goods shipping to customers, maintaining customer experience, meeting the high customer demands that exist and that grow in the market. And we should think about this in the context of a single point of failure. That's key. It's important that you have systems that have high uptime, and you also have systems with high uptime architectures. And so when I say a high uptime architecture, I'm describing like a system that's modular, like the product sortation system that we talked about, that maintains throughput even if individual components are temperamental in their state, if they go up or down. If we lose a particular module because of preventative maintenance that needs to be done, the network of systems that are all deployed of the product sortation system will all still work, while that one is taken offline temporarily to do that preventative maintenance. So it's a high uptime architecture in the sense that throughput is maintained, even with particular components that again have may go down, up and down, depending on the business needs. So it's really about, is the system, when you run the system, are you dreading that event where it brings everything down, which is kind of a burden, and it's a stressor for a lot of ways, personally and in terms of the business, or is it a boon? Is it a pride of the operation? Which also gets back a little bit to this notion of adoption. Is a customer going to put the system in, use it, depend on it, and then will they expand the system? Will they expand it into other facilities, for example? That's all kind of got to be the perspective of automation providers. They have to understand this, they have to architect for this, and they have to respect it relative to how their customers use, again, and adopt their technology.
Makes sense. So in an increasingly dynamic business landscape where automation is becoming essential to remain competitive, what criteria should a company consider when evaluating the reliability and track record of a potential robotic automation partner so they can ensure that they're adopting proven and effective technology solutions?
I think there's probably three things I would highlight there. The first is the technology itself. Let's go back again to what we talked about before. The technology itself has to be flexible, scalable, simple. And when we're talking about simple here, let's think about this in the context of established technologies with not a lot of moving parts that are very easy to maintain. That's really important when we think about uptime and we think about adopting these technologies. You should also think about the track record of the company that you're considering working with. Companies who have had successful rollouts over long periods of time, even of this very transformational, disruptive technology with multiple companies in the same segment, folks that are really deep in the market. Obviously, they're more experienced, they're better design, better support, better implementation, kind of all of the above. So track record is the second thing that I would say that folks should think about. And then the third is, change management. Doing a lot of these projects, change management is benefited when stakeholders are brought in early. For example, if we're working with an engineering team or we're working with an automation team at a customer, when those customers are bringing their partners in maintenance and operations early, they can see that fit. They can lead to a better design. They can lead to a better implementation. They also align culturally, making sure that it's a good fit for the company that you're considering working with. All of those things can help in the assessment, and then in addition, finally, to adoption. So that's, to me, some of the criteria that folks should think about when they're thinking about the reliability, the track record of the companies they're considering working with, the technology itself. Is it designed for the use case? Is it high uptime? the track record of the company, what they've done, who they've worked with, and then lastly, again, change management, how to have a successful project, bringing folks in and making sure that there's a good cultural fit in addition to the operational fit. That would be highlighted there.
Right. All important to think about. It's a big commitment, so you want to make sure you're doing it with as much knowledge as possible. Thank you for that. I want to now move on to some of our audience questions. Again, I want to encourage our audience members to submit their questions for our Q&A, and we will get to as many of those as we can, live time permitting. First question, we currently have automation systems in place within our buildings. How would your solution complement our existing setup, or would it necessitate the removal of our current systems to implement the technology demonstrated here?
That's a really important consideration when you're thinking about automation, how it's going to work with what you already have. Again, minimizing disruption. You also want to maintain operation during deployment through ramp. So yeah, this is definitely an important topic. Our approach, Berkshire Gray's approach, typically in most cases is keep what you have in place during deployment, and then later on you could remove it if applicable. We're kind of deploying, for example, there's a manual process that's fed from the warehouse or from the distribution center. We can deploy, oftentimes, frankly, physically next to the system, next to the manual process, and then cut over to go live with our systems is simply flicking a switch. And instead of the systems the merchandise going to the right to the manual process, it goes to the left to the automated process. So that's a kind of a way that is pretty obvious that we can avoid disruption and removing other equipment. And then when you do that, you can address growth and capacity at the same time. And so, for example, if we have an operation with manual put walls and they're growing and they need more capacity, we can implement our robotic put walls. We add the capacity. We leave the manual put walls in place. That basically lets them grow as they need to in that, potentially even in that old equipment. And then over time in the future, they could take some of those manual assets and turn them into automation or replace them basically with the automated system over time. So it could kind of be done in a bit of stages. Again, maintaining continuity, keeping assets and processes, if they're valuable to the operation, in place, and then kind of growing over time. This approach is afforded because of that, the modular nature of a lot of the majority of our solutions. So I hope that answers the question.
No, that definitely answers the question. Thank you. So next question is, over the past 2 years, our company's e-commerce business has grown significantly, leading us to shift from case level replenishment to each level replenishment. Could you elaborate on how your technology can assist us in this transition and improve our operations?
This is a pretty common customer situation. We work with a lot of customers who built their network on 70% retail and 30% e-com. And now it's 30% retail and 70% e-com. And they've got a lot of assets that are out there it's not quite a square peg in a round hole, but it's kind of approaching that a little bit. And there's a lot of value for these customers when we can reuse existing assets where applicable. And we want to also be flexible long-term if additional changes occur, right? Like there's been a lot of change. Who's to say that the change will stop? And so we're getting back to this notion of flexible solutions. And so, for example, this robotic product sortation that we were talking about, we have customers who are using this for omni-channel. They sort goods into containers and then pack them out into e-commerce containers versus retail containers. And so they're really future-proof, right? Like if retail goes away completely, they can do all their e-commerce here. If they want to open up a bespoke e-commerce node somewhere else, they can do all their retail here. And they've made a good investment in this technology that is flexible to that, and gives them this runway long-term to be more adaptable. And so, this is something you should think about for sure. E-commerce, the growth of that, I don't need to tell you that. But flexibility to me is key as a principle of the solution that you're considering for making sure that you're robust to those changes.
Right. You want your solution to be able to grow with your business and meet your needs as
right,
you
and
move.
change, right? Like
and change.
Growth is one thing, but if your business changes fundamentally and I'm not doing the same thing anymore, how are you going to do your business if it's not a flexible solution?
Right. With the least amount of disruption possible.
Yeah.
Third question, could you provide a more comprehensive overview of your software capabilities and the integration options available to ensure seamless compatibility with our existing systems?
Yeah. WMS integration, this is a topic that comes up in, well, not WMS, any kind of system integration. That's a big topic that comes up in the course of an automation journey, right? You've found the technology that you like, you've done an assessment, it's going to fit, and now you just got to say, okay, I've got to get my IT partners involved and make sure that this will work with all this other business that our systems have to do. Yeah, so very, very relevant topic for every project that we do. And I think from our view, the value that we think we bring is, it's back to flexibility. We, for example, pride ourselves on being easy to work with other systems like the WMS. We work with a lot of enterprise WMSs, and as I'm sure many folks have experienced, we work with a lot of homegrown WMSs. Still folks out there with green screens that we are happy to work with and integrate. And so everything from cloud-based, enterprise WMSs to more aged technology, maybe is a gentle way to say that. And we're really flexible on that. And the way we can be flexible on that is we use a lot of abstraction layers, meaning we write a block of software that can sit between this really advanced robotic technology and any other technology on the other side, and sit in the middle of that and let the robotic technology do its job and speak to the robotic technology in the way that enables it to be performant, but then also is catered to speak to, the right side of the picture, which is, the other technology that was already there, that is proven and established and may or may not change. And then the other piece is, that gives you future proof on those systems as well. For example, so if you're sitting in a situation where you've got a green screen, homegrown system that you want to change someday, that's in place. You can implement technology with this abstraction layer. And then later on, if you change your WMS, it's just a function of changing the abstraction layer, and you've kind of maintained continuity of the automation operations while going on this really difficult WMS, for example, upgrade journey, because of this flexibility that is inherent to our approach. So we are happy to do all that. We also do things like, for example, mimic other systems. So if you've got an integration that works with a put to light, and you want the Berkshire Grey system to talk to the WMS as if it was a put to light, we can do that too, again, because of the benefit of this abstraction layer approach. All that's to say, we know that this lives in a big ecosystem, the technology it does, and it needs to coexist with things that are existing previously and future state partner systems as well. So it's all about flexibility. Long-winded answer. Sorry, Taylor.
No, please don't apologize. No, your solutions are pretty flexible. It's great to touch on all of that. It's really helpful. Next question. When evaluating automation solutions for retail companies that carry a variety of items that's small, high value, bottles with pumps, easily damaged, etc., what advice can you provide around determining what products are viable to run through automation versus remaining an existing manual process?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So, I'll tell you, we do a lot of analysis. We have a lot of experience. For example, we have production videos that show us handling things that are high value or easily damageable. We spend a lot of time with our customers on this, where we put goods, for example, through their existing manual process. We put goods through this automated process, and then we do this big double-blind study and see, compare the damage rates, for example, between these processes. And then we win those instances. And part of the reason is because, humans aren't typically incentivized to do the thorough job. Humans are kind of incentivized to do the fast job. And then the robotic solutions are kind of more deliberate in what they do. But that's all to say that, product damage, merchandise value, we've done a lot of work with folks who are very, very high value goods that, even if we were to damage cellophane on an item, or pucker cellophane with a suction cup, that good would be considered unsellable. And we beat the manual processes typically. So big topic. It's a little bit specific to the use case. Of course, it's specific to the technology, and it's something that you would partner with. I would advise on with your automation supplier to see what a good fit is, and that can include doing testing. For example, I'm sorry, a little thread here. We also do a lot of testing with customers where they can ship us some test freight, either it's expired or otherwise unsellable. And we do a lot of videos and say, hey, like, here's us handling the goods. We provide comfort to them. We also bring folks to our innovation center and show them their goods going through our systems, and that can provide a lot of comfort as well. So that's an important thread for anybody, particularly in the high value space, that they need to address when they think about technology. This is just, maybe I've just spoken to some of the ways that we've done that in the past.
No, it sounds like Berkshire Grey does a lot to, kind of give peace of mind to their customers. And that's a great thing. You did touch on this briefly, but labor displacement is easy to quantify, and ROI, that's return on investment. How do you quantify the other benefits you mentioned, such as labor availability?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for that one. That one's hard. And I've talked to a lot of folks about this in industry, and I don't think a lot of people have cracked it. I think the easiest way that it's happened is that folks used to expect a 3-year payback on this really traditional method of labor replacement. And then when they think about labor displacement, perhaps they would consider a 4-year payback. It's just part of the way that they're doing this is because it is so hard to quantify. They basically are relaxing the constraints as a qualitative acknowledgement that it's not exactly a fair comparison on that replacement piece. I think the folks who have tried to do this are really on 2 threads. One is people spend a tremendous amount of money on temporary hiring, going to outside agencies and getting hires that are going to come in the door. And then once they come in the door, maybe they leave after lunch and they never come back. There's a lot of cost that goes into getting this labor that is in the building. And if you can defer some of those costs because, hey, I needed 800 people at peak in the past, and now I need 300. There's a piece that I can quantify in terms of that lesser need, basically deferring that cost, deferring that hiring center cost. That's one way that I've seen this done successfully. Another one is, of course, the value of lost sales. That one's a little less quantified because operators just make it work, right? Like operators are going to do whatever it takes. They're going to run, if it's a 12-hour building, maybe they'll run a 18-hour shift one day just to get goods out the door. And so we could look at things like overtime in that case. We can look at potentially, again, the value of lost sales, but it's hard to really put a pin on really quantifying that piece. So for the person asking me that question, I would love to have an academic discussion on what they think we should do in terms of quantifying the value of availability of labor. But I think this is evolving in the space, and I think there'll be a better answer for that if you come back to our webinar next year. Or sorry,
No,
we have a webinar upcoming. But if you were to ask me this question in a webinar next year, I would have a better answer for you.
No, thank you for that. And anyone feel free to follow up about any of these questions, and we will be touching more on these in the November 8th webinar, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end of the presentation. Here's a fascinating question. We've seen some movement away from boxes to shippable bags. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Bags, particularly in e-commerce, are certainly prolific. And as we talked about before, a lot of the technology that exists in buildings today was built around retail, or maybe it was built around boxes. And now folks are trying to ship a lot of bags, and so they're trying to make it work in this space. I've seen folks who tote bags. They create a tremendous amount of bags that they're going to ship, and they place them all into a tote. So they're adding a touch there. And then they send it down to the shipping door and they take them out of the tote. So they're adding a touch there. And that's really, to me, a function of trying to make do with equipment that's not well suited for that use case. So we see a lot of this. I would also say we spend a lot of time and energy on bags. We have really novel technology in terms of auto bagging, where we can, pack goods into auto baggers, if that's the use case here. We can also scan bags really well. There's a much, if this person's interested, would be happy to follow up and talk about, Berkshire Grey's novel. It's called hyperscanner technology, which is bespoke and it gets really high read rates on polybags, accustomed to that use case. Our robots all do really well handling polybags. So Poly bags are something that have been continuing to grow, bags for shipping. And Berkshire Grey has seen a lot of that. And we spend a lot of time and energy on being able to handle those things. And so depending on this person's use case, I think we would love to learn more and see if there's a problem that we could solve together on that.
No, I think we've all seen an uptick in shippable bags. So it's fantastic that you have something to address, or a solution rather to address that, or you've been thinking about it. Next question. What are some of those value drivers upstream and downstream of the operations that customers are using for investment justification? We touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So certainly, if goods can be received faster and to get into a shippable state faster, that can improve inventory positions. Basically, you need less in the warehouse. You maybe even need less at the store if you can get things to the store in a shippable state. So those are all quantifiable, right? The value of inventory and shrink and all these things. Labor, of course, upstream and downstream. One of the challenges here is that a lot of folks that we work with on automation projects are responsible for the P&L of the distribution center, and they don't have purview elsewhere. But the folks who can consider kind of, again, holistically, for example, the labor downstream at a retail center to unload a truck, if you can reduce that labor, there's value, right? And if the folks who can quantify that, that's maybe it is an example. Another piece is like if we're doing an e-commerce fulfillment opportunity, and the way that the customer did their e-commerce before is that they handed to 4 carriers, and the carriers just went out. There was a bin for carrier 1, there was a bin for carrier 2, there's a bin for carrier 3, and that's all they do. If their new solution with e-commerce can sort, more discreetly, so it's like carrier node 1, carrier 1 node A, carrier 1 node B, carrier 1 node C, you can actually get goods to customers faster and shave on shipping costs. But that takes a really holistic view, right? The person who's responsible for the automation has to understand the shipping costs and take that into account when they think about automation. So I meandered, but it's a broad topic again, and a part of our consultative approach in our engagement with customers is to try to help them find these things. Really think about our team is really born out of a lot of warehousing, a lot of operations, a lot of industrial engineering, and so we're really kind of, when we're looking at technology, focused on these broader impacts, and we're going to try to kind of bring the customer along so that they understand what the realm of the possible is relative to value, again, across their network.
Great. A lot of answers, very customer focused. We always like to hear that. We have one more question. Another question. When evaluating automation solutions, what additional considerations should be made for distribution centers with high volume variance, like holidays and peak days?
It's a tough one. There's this notion of, do you build the church for Easter Sunday or not? And from our view, we try again to use flexibility to our advantage here. A lot of times, I was describing an instance, for example, where we deployed some robotic put walls near some manual put walls for growth. And so what that customer is doing is they're using the robotic put walls all the time. And then when they've got their peak needs, or when they need even more capacity, they're flexing back into their old solutions. And then over time, as they grow, they'll add more robotic put walls, and then it'll all be robotic put wall at the end. But every customer is different. I say sizing to building the church for Easter Sunday, or sizing for peak, sizing for the peak of peaks isn't super common. I think it's more common that folks would kind of downtick from that a little bit, and use kind of some operational flexibility to handle that. But everyone's got a different approach there, and it's part of on a given project, on a given opportunity, how we think about deployment, how we think about ramp, how we think about growth over time. So it's definitely an important topic, and something, again, in our consultative approach and working with our customers, that we spend some energy on and make sure that there's a good plan for them.
I like that analogy, building the church for Easter Sunday. It somehow makes complete sense with what you're talking about. Great. I'm looking at the clock. We're actually just about out of time, but I want to get to one last question. So Berkshire Grey has worked with many large household brands to deploy robotic automation. What are some of the things that you've learned? What are the big lessons you have to share in your experience from supporting millions of production picks.
Okay, so pardon the cliche, but I think the big thing that I would say that's been learned is that this business starts with a customer, this business ends with a customer. We are singularly focused on the fact that Berkshire Grey is not successful unless our customers are successful. And to this end, our view on technology that's out there and the options that are available is that there's a lot of technology that's cool, but unless it's solving a felt real customer problem, it's really not that interesting in this space, at least. Maybe it's interesting on YouTube. You have to pardon me, Taylor, for another analogy here. Many technologies are a hammer looking for a nail. Berkshire Grey took a different approach. We went out and saw what was out there, and we saw a lot of screws. And so instead of trying to bring a hammer to the screw, we invented the screwdriver. There's another analogy for you. So that's a big piece of this, right? The customer first. It's all about customer experience. You'll be successful if your customers are successful because you're a partner to them and they view you as such. And then relative to technologies supporting millions of production picks, the technology itself, the technologies that work for customers are flexible, they're scalable, and they are simple. But simple, I keep using this word, that doesn't mean easy. Simple really should mean elegant. This is a sophisticated technology that's a blend of hardware and software that's working together to solve a real felt customer problem. And so in terms of those learnings and doing that work, I'd actually say that my colleague, Chris Geyer, is going to be hosting a follow-up webinar to this one on November 8th. And in that session, Chris is going to be going deeper on lessons we've learned at Berkshire Grey over the course of performing, again, those millions of production picks. So that would be mine.
Fantastic answer. I do love a good analogy, as I've stated, and generally really enjoy hearing about how Berkshire Grey's extremely customer focused in their mission. We are unfortunately just about out of time, but as Noah mentioned, we do have a follow-up webinar on this subject on November 8th. That's with Chris Geyer, and you'll be getting a follow-up email with all of this information and an invitation to register for that show. You'll also receive a link to view this webinar for 30 days. Thank you, Noah, for a fantastic presentation, and thank you all so much for stopping by. We will see you again soon.
Thank you.